Okay, good day, everyone. While we're waiting on things to get ready for the show, I'm just going over some details and informations and stuff like that. Let's see. I'll get to go find some more little applications and stuff. What's this? This might be useful. Okay. That. And then we're going to go here. Click on it and see what it does. Okay, so we can create some templates. And turn the music on. And do our logo. No. Hmm. Well, I guess that doesn't show up right there. Let me go all files and open that one. It's too big, huh? I'm just waiting on Rhett to join. Don't know what's taking him so long. I have no idea what any of this does. But I guess. Let's see. I don't know how to save it. Why is this so large? Put it up back over there. This opens up. Okay, so I've got that there. How do I save it for that? So let's do. Okay, I have no idea. Okay, I got it. All right, so it did something. Let's see what this does. Okay, so it does this. Which is neat. Get to make a little intro. I'm working on making little intros and stuff. Found this little app. I don't like the flashing. Oh, I'll have to figure out how to make a better version. I have no clue. What, yeah.
I gotta stop vaping for real.
What, are you dying over there?
I just feel like so congested in my chest. My chest is tight. I feel like I can breathe fine, but I feel like I can't. Like I've been chronically congested for like a while now. So I just bought some nicotine pouches and I haven't vaped except for this morning, but man, it's really just irritating.
Well, that's why I don't do any of that stuff. I mean, I get when I smoke my cigars, I get kind of sick of smoking them. So, but then again, I don't smoke them that often, which is probably good. Which is probably a good thing. Definitely a good thing. But I get sick after smoking for a while because I smoked the really big fat ones. So after for a little while, I'll put it out and probably finish it a week later or something like that. Anywho, let's see. What am I doing? Close this down. And I'm gonna close that down. Okay, so we are doing the Federalist Papers tonight. You know, I haven't even had the chance to look over these as much as I've wanted to. I've been so busy. But the show must.
I haven't even read the last section.
I just printed it off this morning when I was in the middle of Sunday school. But the show must go on, so we'll still be able to produce a show. Anywho, I gotta have some content for the people who come and follow us on Facebook and all that nice stuff. So I've been live for the last several minutes. Let me see. I got my shirt sort of low buttoned, like by like 3 or 4 buttons because my stitches are bothering me. I gotta go get these things taken out because they itch. They itch so much. And it's annoying. I don't know if you've ever had stitches, but they're annoying.
Yeah, right here. Thought I told you that.
Oh yeah. Were they annoying for you? Did they itch?
Oh man, probably.
Yeah, for me it's annoying. It's a nuisance. If it wasn't raining, I'd walk over there.
My aunt took them out.
Do it.
I didn't even go back to the hospital. My aunt took them out.
Oh, I don't have.
I had long hair at the time, so I could hide it when I went to work.
What? You had got that when you were working at Piccadilly?
No, Waffle House.
Oh. I haven't been at Waffle House in a while. I used to go there every morning, eat the same thing. Well, I would order. There were 3 things that I would order, and most of the time I would order the sausage, eggs, and grits bowl, small, and a cup of coffee, and a glass of orange juice. Or if I didn't feel like eating that, I would have them toast me regular white bread and toast me a ham sandwich. They would toast the ham and give me a little bit of cheese on there. Occasionally, I'd have an egg with it, and then I just put of the strawberry jam on there, and be perfect. And and ever so slightly, I would get the waffle sometimes, but not usually. Most of the time, if I was going to get something, it was the sausage, eggs, and grits bowl. And if I wasn't getting that, it was usually going to be a toasted ham sandwich with strawberry jam, and always a coffee and an orange juice. I don't know. Are you a man of habit when it comes to what you order at restaurants?
I mean, I guess mostly, but I don't usually go to restaurants. I hadn't been to a restaurant since we went to see Hamilton. That was the last time. But before that, I don't remember the last time I went to a restaurant. But usually, if I go to a restaurant that I go to that I've been to like a lot of times, I usually get the same thing.
Yeah, me too. I'm a person of habit when it comes to things, especially when it comes to food, because I love eating good food. What?
Like, if you know what's good, then, there's really no reason to experiment unless you're just feeling adventurous. That's my opinion.
Well, I do experiment. If I haven't been there in a while, and I look at the menu and I see something that I haven't eaten before, I'm like, okay, what does this taste like? I want to know if this is going to be the new thing. But I always have my safe zone as to what I'm going to go back to, eh, all of the time.
The safe zone, really, because you don't want to waste a trip to a restaurant to try something that wasn't as good as what you could have got.
Exactly.
But
I go to Olive Garden. I have my safe zone with the tour of Italy, and my favorite is the mushroom is the ravioli de portobello, which is ravioli stuffed with portobello mushrooms instead of with meat, and that's one of my favorites is to get that. So I have, I have my favorites, but I like to test. I like to taste different things and see if they'll be good. And obviously, I love the Zuka soup. I love the salad at Olive Garden. Uh, I don't like the breadsticks though. There's too much salt on them.
I hadn't been to Olive Garden since like 2015 or 2014.
It's been a while since I've been as well, and they're my favorite restaurant chain. And it's been like 3 or 4 years since I last went. The last time I went to Olive Garden, I was still selling RVs, and that was in 2019, I think.
I get, I think every time I go to a Mexican restaurant, I get a taco salad. No matter which Mexican restaurant it is.
Hmm. See, whenever I go to Mexican restaurants, hmm, well, most of the time I go to Papitos if I go to a Mexican restaurant, but usually I get what was it called? It was uh it was something about Colorado. But it's got the rice, and it's got the bean paste, and it's got some peppers and chicken and steak and all types of stuff. And then I get the big burrito verde, which is a giant big old burrito with cheese sauce all over it. And so and then I always finish it up with a margarita, usually strawberry. Anywho, let's go ahead and start recording so we can get started here. I don't know. Do you have this problem where you can't clear your throat out and it's just always really, really dry? Maybe I'm not staying hydrated enough, I think. Maybe I should start drinking more fluids
I
throughout the day.
do have a problem. I can't ever clear my throat because it's always congested.
Yeah,
So,
well,
but
that's
that's why I'm literally constantly trying to clear my throat.
I mean, I try to clear my throat, but it always gets hoarse and dry. And so now I'm trying to clear my throat. It's just, can't get it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, that's just dehydration.
You know, so I should try to.
You know, I drink so much fluid that like my face will get puffier by the end of the day.
And see, I need to start drinking fluids regularly again. I probably get by on maybe 1 or 2 glasses of fluid in an entire day.
It's weird. I honestly feel like when I look at myself on camera, maybe it's just because I shaved, my face looks chubbier to me than it does in real life. And it shouldn't, like my face is not chubby when I'm at like 179 pounds. My face is usually not this puffy, but maybe it's just because I've been drinking so much water.
See, I hate looking at myself in the camera because I see that this side of my face is uh is asymmetrical to the other side of my face. It's just like this part of my chin kind of bulges out a lot more. I'm guessing that's because when I used to fight, in the fights, this side, the cartilage here on this chin, is much thinner than the cartilage on this chin, on this side of the chin, or maybe my jaw
Hmm.
is just misaligned from taking so many hits when I used to fight all the time in the ring. But this side, I look straight. This side is
Yeah, I
clearly
never
more
noticed it before, but I see it now.
more jagged.
Hmm.
It's asymmetrical, and it bothers me when I stare at the camera, and I'm like, I'm trying to adjust my face to where, you know, it looks. And
There's no point in even trying, dude. Like,
maybe my head is constantly tilted one way or the other, and it kind of makes it worse. And I'm trying to tilt my head, and it never fixes it. It never works, and so it's just at this
that's
weird angle to my jaw.
well, I don't really know what you do about that other than surgery. I mean, it does look like your jaw is misaligned now that you mention it.
It is. It's like this. It's like over here somewhere. Like
Yeah,
I
like
guess, yeah. It's like kind of like that.
uh, not that not that exaggerated, but it does look like it sits over to this side a little more.
Yeah. So I hate looking at myself in the camera. So when I take pictures, people was like, you got to get me on my good side. I clearly have a good side because I take a picture on this side, and you don't see that. You don't see that bulging area. But if I take a picture on this area, you get much more chin action on this side. You get so much more chin action.
I feel like everybody has a good side, right?
If you have a perfectly symmetrical face, then
I
then
mean,
both sides are good sides.
my face is pretty symmetrical, but I still have a preference for one side.
Well, your face is no longer symmetrical because you have a wound in your forehead.
Yeah, but like, other than that, but I've always had a preference for one side, but I mean, I've seen pictures taken with the other side and they look fine. But I don't like any pictures that are taken of me if I'm over a certain weight. I
Well,
feel like
that's
it's just every picture is terrible if I'm like 200 plus pounds.
so you
But
mean
once
every
I get down to once I'm down to like the weight that I'm at now or lower, I actually look all right, even in candid photos.
so you mean every picture from high school downwards
Yeah,
were not good.
I don't like any of them really.
I don't
Although
like
I did
any
lose a lot of weight 11th grade year, but I think I gained it back by senior year.
I don't like any pictures where my hair is not done because of this bald spot. So I have I always wear a hat, or I have my hair cut, or I have a topic I'll put up there whenever I want to show my hair, but I can't figure out where I put the bottle of topic that I have at, and I haven't bought another one, but I sprinkle a little bit of that up there to make everything look good so that when I do a show or something, I don't want to have my hat on. I have the topic sprinkled up there.
Did you have a receding hairline in high school?
On the sides of my hair, it's always been sort of receding, but that's also because of the way that I comb my hair. Because I've always had my hair styled and texturized, I comb it backwards so that the curls come back upwards, all the way to the back. So on the sides of my hair, they're much thinner, But this part right here, I blame on my granny because she left the texturizer in there too long when I was texturizing my hair, and then she tried to line it up with a razor blade, a shaving razor, and then from that day forward, it just never really grew back in that area.
You just killed the hair follicles.
Yeah, it just never
But
really grew
I mean,
back.
have you tried any kind of treatments?
I'm gonna try keeps, but for the most part, I do black Jamaican castor oil. I have the black Jamaican castor oil lotion, and I put that on there, but I don't do it as frequently as I'm supposed to, which is probably why I don't see so many good results. But I am going to be starting to try to do the keeps thing. They say you'll see results within 6 months or so. So I'm going to try doing that. The last time I was going to try it, they charged me like $150. I'm like, I'm not paying $150 for no hair cream.
I know there's a lot of, I mean, I don't know much about it because I, obviously don't worry about it, but I know there's a lot of treatments that actually work out
I was,
there.
I was thinking about Bonsley. Obviously, the greatest treatment would be just to go get a toupee, but
Oh man,
I
go all
don't think I'm
Trump on them.
I don't think I'm at that area yet, or maybe get a permanent sew in. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's like last resort. You can get a hair transplant from the back of your hair, move it to the front. Elon Musk got one of those. If you look at like older videos of him, he looks more bald.
Yeah, I think I might wind up doing something like that where I can get that little patched in there because the rest of my hair grows fine. It's just this one area that won't grow. And so
That doesn't seem like that's natural.
yeah, that's how I said I think my granny killed it with the razor and the texturizer, leaving it in there too long. Because I texturized my hair, basically it's like getting a perm for men, except you don't leave it in nearly as long because you would leave in a perm. Because you put it in there, then you rinse it out, then you put in the curling creams and stuff in there, and then the dehumidifier and all that stuff, and then the hair curls itself back up and holds its shape for a really, really long time. But with this particular time, it was almost like because she left it in there so long, it was almost like somebody ironed my hair. It was just really, really flat.
The damn lamp right there. It's so bright that it just overpowers everything in that area.
You know what you
All
should
you
do?
all you can see is Abraham Lincoln. You can tell this is Kennedy, right?
Yeah. But you know
You
what you should
can't
do?
you
You should
can't tell
do
who that is, can you?
no,
That's Ronald Reagan. When he
but
came to Jones Park, that's actually my mom's, but it's a
that's a really
poster.
small. It's really small,
Yeah,
far
well,
away. But you know what you should do? You should do what I do. I have a
Guy
lamp
Fawkes.
right here in front of me, and it has no cover. So
I have one right here too.
I tape a uh I tape a piece of paper of copy paper onto it, and it acts as a filter for the light so that it illuminates me without having that bright glare shining in my face or in my camera. And then I'm also going to get one to put behind the green screen because I think that's also going to make it look brighter on the backside. Because I've noticed differences when my windows open and I get that natural light shining in and it hits the back of this. It illuminates the green screen much better, which makes it easier for my backgrounds to stick to it.
Natural light's always the best, but
Yeah.
even if I turn that lamp down, it's got 3 settings and it's on the brightest setting right now. But even if I put it on the lowest setting, it's still too bright to see all that stuff up there. You
Tape a
can tell
piece
what
of
that
paper.
is, right? That's the George Washington crossing the Potomac.
I can't really see it.
It's that painting, that famous painting. And there, of course, there's a Mississippi. It's a wooden
Yeah. Yeah,
Mississippi
I seen
cutout
that.
thing, but it's too far away to really see now. It would when I had it all right here, like there just wasn't enough room, but you could see everything. That's temporary.
Okay, so now that we're done with all the bonus material. Good day, everyone, and welcome
Oh
to the
man,
Serve America with me, your host, Andre Pace, and my co-host, Rhett Williams. We are here today to do the Federalist Papers, number 16. through 25. We didn't do any last week, and so we're doubling up.
I think
And
we're
we're
going to
gonna
try to make this one condensed, like that the length of a normal episode, but covering more material so we can actually get through the Federalist Papers instead of making it take forever.
Yes. And also because we're not going to cover every single number in these, because again, what we're doing is we're finding that several of these are broken down into different phases that the founders would that Hamilton and Madison wanted to talk about. So they broke them down into different particular phases. And so rather than going through and reading the material and reading the same thing over and over again to you guys, what we've done is we've gone in, we've read it, we've looked through it, and we've outlined the most important elements of each one, of each one of the papers and each topic that they have. And then we're going to speak on the topic and not go through all of the paper, because again, it's five papers. And this one here, this one's page 79 to 99. So about 30 pages that all say the same thing. So we've narrowed it down. We've changed our focus so that you'll be able to get all of the relevant information.
So let's be clear here. 16 through 20 are all the same topic, and that is the insufficiency of the present Confederation to preserve the Union. And
And then 21 through 25 are all on other defects to the present Confederation. And 25,
which is, of course, in reference to the Articles of Confederation, Perpetual Union, which, by the way, I'm going to go get my copy because I have a copy of that sitting over there. We might need it.
I have a copy with me as well. Somewhere. Yeah, there it is on the floor. It fell down when I was rotating in my chair. But then you'll see in 25 and the next five, you'll see that they all talk about the powers necessary to the government, and it breaks it down: the powers necessary for common defense, the powers necessary for the preservation of the Union. And so that's going to be a little bit more in depth, 21 through 25. It's going to be a little bit more in depth. So without further ado,
I know where I got this.
Where?
I got this one from the National Archives, the gift shop.
For the National Archives, the same ones that are
yes,
beating up Donald Trump.
But, that was like they actually let us loose on the National Mall for a day by ourselves at this convention I was at, and it was me and my roommate and some girl from Minnesota, and I made them, because there was only one place I cared about going to really on the National Mall, and that was the archives, because I wanted to see the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. So I was like, y'all are coming with me. If you don't want to, you'll thank me for this later in life. But we waited like 4 or 5 hours there. And then the rest of that time we went to like the Smithsonian and something like that, a couple of other places.
Well, that's fun. Okay, so the insufficiency to the present Confederation to preserve the Union. This is Federalist paper number 16. As usual, I like to start by reading at least the first paragraph of each number. So, and starting with number 16. Written by Alexander Hamilton to the New York Packet on December 4th of 1787 to the people of the state of New York. The tendency of the principle of the legislation for states or communities in their political capacities, as it has been exemplified by the experiment we have made of it, is equally attested by the events which have befallen our other governments of the Confederate kind, of which we have any account in exact proportion to its prevalence in those systems. The confirmations of this fact will be worthy of a distinct and particular examination. I shall content myself with barely observing here that of all the confederacies of antiquity which history has handed down to us, the Lycian and an Aegean, Aegean, oh geez, I'm messing that word up, leagues, as far as there remains vestiges of them, appear to have been most free from the fetters of that mistaken principle, and were accordingly those which have best deserved and have most liberally received the applauding suffrages of political writers.
So I'm pretty
So,
sure that's a reference to the Achaean region of Greece, the Achaean League.
yes.
Um, so these pretty much all of these 16 through 20 make historical references throughout them nonstop. And he starts, of course, with Greece and moves on to Rome. And then he speaks about some other confederacies in Europe closer in time to us. But it clearly shows that they're, I mean, just like the rest of them, that they're very well aware of history and different experiments that have been run with similar forms of government to what they wanted to create. And they looked at those systems and figured out what their problems were and attempted to create remedies for all of those issues in order to make a confederacy work.
You know, I love that Hamilton writes it saying that this is an experiment, because that's what we call it. That even for 250 years, this is still the world's greatest experiment. And if it fails, history will look back at this moment and say, well, at this particular period in time, there was this experiment that lasted for about two and a half centuries. And these were the problems that this experiment had, which led to its collapse. And this is the reason why we should all fall back into Danes and Lords and all of this other stuff that we have become accustomed to for so long as part of human history.
You know, and sometimes it's referred to as the Masonic experiment, which is an interesting way to frame it because so many of the founders were Freemasons, and the Freemasons has a history going back a long time, but of course they came from Europe, and they were just literally just Masons. They were builders, architects, and that's why they use so many um, architectural references and refer to God in some ways as like the master builder or the architect, the eternal architect. But they decided, of course, this wasn't a decision that was made by the organization of the Freemasons. Some people think that it was, but framing it as a Masonic experiment, as the Masons have decided to build their own country. And it's worked pretty well so far, but it is still an experiment and everything has to end. But just because it ends doesn't mean the experiment failed.
Yeah, and I would say that what America is in right now is the greatest testing phase of an experimental of scientific method, so to speak, where we have our hypothesis, we have the experiment, we have a test, and what right now we're in a test to see if the experiment was a success or not. And I say success because if it fails, if America crumbles because of this test that we're under, that means there were some things that could have been refined in the writings that conceptually or contextually. If it holds together, however, then we see a success in that part of the experiment, that if you allow freedom to exist within these narrow constructs, which are really not all too narrow, which are very extremely broad,
I
but
think
we have,
in some cases they're a little too broad because people, you know, they take them and stretch them as far as they'll go.
yes, which has led to some of the problems that we have right now. But when you take a look at it and say, well, it succeeded, everything came together because of how freedom works and people were able to vote and get things back on track, we would consider that to be a success of our system. If it collapsed, we'd be able to say that it was a failure of the system, and we'd be able to take the remnants of it and produce another experiment, hopefully, one that will uh, transcend the last.
I don't think that. So obviously the founders knew that there was, they were very familiar with the entirety of the biblical corpus, of course, which was a major influence. And I think that the fact that we've lost that as a whole is detrimental to being able to understand the purpose and how any of this stuff works and why they made the system the way they made it. And the Liberty Bell, has transcribed on it a verse from Leviticus. I don't remember where it is, but it says proclaim liberty throughout the land to all the inhabitants thereof in Leviticus. But of course, there was other philosophical influences: Montesquieu, John Locke, Pufendorf, the Greeks, the Romans. And how many people do you know, honestly, that are as in, I'm not trying to boast here, but are as informed about this kind of stuff as we are? Probably no one.
Very few. I
I don't really
know.
know any.
I know of some. For example, I came to you very specifically when I started my show, and unfortunately you were in the pen when I came to you when I was running for Congress. I wanted to bring you aboard because that was the first thing that came to mind was, okay, I know that there's somebody out there that shares the same thoughts that I have and is a little bit more eloquent in the forms of political matters than I am that I could use. And so that's why I reached out to you. I reach out to other people. A good friend of mine in New York, the Owl Man, he's brilliant. His only problem is he's a drunk. So he's a New Yorker, and a drunk, belligerent New Yorker that is intelligent and very well read and very well studied is something that that is hard to present itself in a show format. And you know, and I reach out to other people. Jay is another one. Jay didn't start off being a person that I wanted to bring on, but over time, as we began to study and then with one another, he opened himself up to being able to show those particular things. But of of people within my normal circles, I would say none. Very, very few, if any, will be able to contribute an hour in a conversation of this kind to this show.
So I don't think it's necessary for everybody to be that knowledgeable, but people should have at least a basic understanding. Um, but this is not even my main subject. This is like a side interest, really. But I do this with everything I'm interested in. I try to research and learn as much as I possibly can in
You
anything I'm
see,
interested in.
and that's what I think I was in a Bible Sunday school class, and we are talking about addictions to spirits and stuff. And I always said, fortunately, I have never had an addiction of any kind. But then they said to me, "Well, you're addicted to something," and I said, "I suppose you would be correct because I am addicted to the pursuit of knowledge. I
Yeah.
love to learn, and one of the things about mortality that gets to me is one day I will die." And I will have not learned all there is to learn. And even if I were to able to live forever, I would still not know everything because I can't be everywhere at once, observing everything from all sides, and I can't read people's minds either. So I wouldn't be able to know what they know either about what's going
Well,
on.
those are the things that nobody can ever learn. like whatever, unless I tell you what I'm thinking, and I could be lying. Who knows? You really don't know. But
But
I
no,
feel the
I
same
don't.
way.
I don't mean it that way. What I mean by is say for example, let's take the Michael Epstein case and all that stuff. If I was everywhere at once and I'm able to watch things and all that stuff and be able to write things down, I still wouldn't be able to know the perspective from each side. I'd be able to know from bird's eye view, but I wouldn't be able to know this perspective coming from both sides of the argument.
You know how the trope in fiction where there's the knowledge that will kill you, the knowledge that the forbidden knowledge that if you access or read this book or whatever, it'll kill you
Yeah.
because it's just too much, or more likely or more often it's you'll go insane. You'll just lose your mind because it's too much. That would be a very tempting offer. And I've always said that, like, I'd probably just read it
You
because
know
I have to know.
the problem for me isn't that I would go crazy. I don't think the problem with me is that so much of the knowledge that I consume, I never use. And I think that's the biggest issue with having an addiction to knowledge or the pursuit of it is for the most part, we hoard the information to ourselves. You know, we write down what we think people should know, but we have literal appendixes of information just kind of, I kind of think of it as a library in our brains, and we have so much information that that we don't chronicleize, that we don't make tangible. And if we consume all of this knowledge, if we were able to live all this time and be able to know all this stuff, we use so little of what we know that it'll be a waste for one person to know all that.
You know, I do sometimes get sad when I think of how little I know compared to how much there is to know. I'm like, man, it's just like, what's the point of all this? I'll never learn that much. Like I know it's like basically next to nothing when you think about everything that's possible to know, and it's depressing.
I sort of try to think of myself as Iwatu, the Watcher from the Marvel comics, where he doesn't get involved in anything. He just watches everything. And I sort of feel like that a lot of times where I'm just trying to learn stuff. I don't want to learn things to get involved. I just want to know it just because.
Yeah, and there's
There's
no
no
point in knowing things if you don't use them.
exactly. And I see and that's the problem for the person who pursues knowledge. We pursue knowledge for the wrong reasons, which is
It's
the reason why we can
literally
never get all the knowledge in the world.
it's literally yeah, it's well, it is a pursuit that you can never catch what you're after, which is, basically just like addiction.
Especially because of the era and period of time in which you were born. Because you may be able to learn everything uh in a lifetime and then die, and then stuff happens after you die that you will never learn. Well, after you've died, there's no reason for you to learn. But if you are born in a period of time where, for example, here on Earth, billions of years have already passed, we will never be able to know what the Earth looked like at the beginning, what happened when it cooled, what was truly the first thing to crawl on land, how did the dinosaurs really die? We can't go back in time, so we're
I
never
think you're
able
being a
to
little
know any of
presumptuous
that.
now. You know, from a physical human perspective, yeah, but who knows? We might actually be able to access that knowledge after we die. Who knows?
Well, I think that would be the
And
ultimate. I
I
think that
think
would
we
be
will be able to.
the ultimate heaven for me.
You say
Well,
consciousness survives natural death. I mean, pretty much there's so much evidence for that when it comes to near death experiences and out of body that it's basically guaranteed that consciousness survives natural death. So we're getting kind of off topic here, but your wish might be granted, sir.
well, you
Might
see
be able
that
to
I
learn
think that
forever.
I think that would be the eternal heaven for me would be, go to heaven and be bestowed with knowledge of God. And when I say knowledge of God, I don't just mean to see him, but to be bestowed with his knowledge, the wisdom that he gave to people to Solomon, which magnified in a different level. I mean, I actually envy Solomon because he was able to receive such a marvelous gift.
Yeah, Solomon is. I have always like had an affinity for Solomon because like some of the stuff that he Ecclesiastes is my favorite book in the Old Testament, and the story. You remember the story where there was two women with the kid, and they were disputing. Like one of them said it was hers, the other one said it was hers. So the way that he found out which was the real mother was like, okay, bring me the kid, and pulls out a sword,
And cut him in half.
and one of them, the one of them's like, no, I don't care. Go ahead. Like, obviously, you're not the mother. It's so simple, but it was so like genius.
Yes, you go over the top to be able to find the most basic answer. And but yeah, I absolutely envy that. And in a way, I envy the founders because they've left us such nuggets, but because we weren't there, we're missing so much.
Let's see. So right here, he has actually a prediction. Once the sword is drawn, the passions of men observe no bounds of moderation, which is something people should keep in mind when they discuss civil war in our era. The suggestions of wounded pride, the instigations of irritated resentment would be apt to carry the states against which the arms of the Union were exerted to any extremes necessary to avenge the affront or to avoid the disgrace of submission. The first of the first war of this kind would probably terminate in a dissolution of the Union. Well, now we see that it didn't, but certainly a second would, I believe, ultimately lead to a permanent dissolution.
Well, going on to that, I mean, the second paragraph, and there's also another one that I'd like to read from the chat from number 16. The exceptional principle may, as truly as empathetically, be styled the parent of anarchy. It has been seen that delinquencies in the numbers of the Union are its natural and necessary offspring, and that whenever they happen, the only constitutional remedy is force, and the immediate effect of the use of it, civil war. And then later he writes, to this reasoning, it may perhaps be objected that if any state should be disaffected to the authority of the Union, it could at any time obstruct the execution of its laws and bring the matter of the same issue of force, with the necessity of which of which the opposite scheme is reproached. And again, very staunch predictions uh, by Hamilton, but they work. Civil war is the immediate effect of the use of force by governments, by the people, and we I hate as we again we come off as harbingers of doom, but we are in that particular chapter again where the use of force may, in fact, be civil war here soon, and because of the reasoning which we have objected to. And the government has refused to acknowledge those reasonings, and they have refused to allow themselves to be reproved by us. They cast away our approval. They don't like to be reproached by us. They dismiss us when we tell them what we want them to do. For example, Liz Cheney, she wants to go run for president of the United States, and we've told her that you are not good enough to run Wyoming. What makes you think that you should even consider going for the highest office in the land and comparing yourself to Abraham Lincoln of all people?
Even Mitt Romney said she wouldn't win. But I don't think the point is. I don't think she's trying to win. I think she's just trying to start an anti-Trump movement, which has already been going on for like 6 years
7 years.
now.
Ever since Trump came down to tarmac.
She's trying to be the hero of the establishment. You know, the Democrats love her. When the Democrats love you, come on now.
Well,
We
yeah,
should be
then
suspicious.
I saw a report today. They said, well, the Democrats are worried that Liz Cheney will steal some votes from Joe Biden in 2024. That's what they're worried about. They're not worried about the literal collapse of our nation, the literal death. And I mean literal in the actual sense of the word, the death that they are about to cause with this bill that they have passed, with what they are doing with the world leaders. And I'm not talking about the world leaders that run other nations. I'm talking about, as you know, what happened at what was it? The video we watched with all of them together. I can't remember the word. I had it on the tip of my tongue. The convention that Bill Gates and all these.
World Economic Forum.
Yeah, them. That at Davos, the World Economic Forum, and they have already said that this sacrifice is necessary. And the Democrats, the establishment, are more concerned about getting rid of Donald Trump than they are concerned about the literal death, hunger, and war that they are about to start. All in the name of climate. Well, I don't even know what their real agenda
No, okay.
is.
So look, their agenda is exactly what's going on right now. They hate Trump so much because he poses a threat to it. He might actually put an end to it. And if he does, then their whole New World Order plan is out the window. This is their last chance to do it. They did have Agenda 2030, but they've now fast tracked it to Agenda 2025.
Yeah, but again, what is the true agenda? We know now that the agenda is to remove Trump, but what is their true end game? Is it to Thanos everything because
Consolidation,
of resources?
basically, a consolidation of power, which they already have, but a further consolidation of power into a global elite and basically get rid of some third world people and just completely revamp the whole system. Like globalism as we know it is unsustainable at this point. Several developed countries around the world don't have population replacement rate. There's only a few countries that are going to be able to make it.
And so the goal of these people are to eliminate roughly 75% of the population in order to create long-term sustainability for their vision.
I don't think it's quite that high, but it's a large number.
Billions will have to die in order for them to get to their goal.
Plenty of people are going to starve this winter. Millions. This is exactly what happened in the Soviet Union when they took all the farmers, made them stop working, locked them up, or whatever.
You know, we haven't seen something like this since the great. Do you recall the Great Freeze, the Great Winter? It happened right after the bubonic plague, where it caused pretty much all of the vegetation in Europe just ceased to grow. And for I think it was about a year or so, it was a volcano. I think it was a volcano that had erupted, and it caused a significant amount of um of greenhouse gases and stuff that trapped into the atmosphere. It kept everything cold. Nothing would really grow. And so the population decreased for the first time in human history during that one particular, I think it was a year, maybe might have been, I think it might have been 3 years, but I think it was a year. A population decreased for the first time in human history because they could not produce crop, simply because of that event. But that event was triggered by a natural phenomenon. What they're trying to do And this is what happens every time you try to play God, every time you try to play Mother Earth. You try to do what Mother Earth does on its own, which is correctionary cycle. When Mother Earth thinks it doesn't have enough resources, it corrects the roster. When human beings try to do that, it magnifies the issue to a caliber of which is is almost uh, damaging to the Earth's natural process.
It is damaging because no human being can possibly take all possible situations and factors into account. We don't, our minds aren't big enough. We can't hold all that information. So when we go and start messing with anything when it comes to the environment, anything could happen. And these are completely unforeseen catastrophes that we create because we just don't know everything.
Yeah, and so and I'm sitting back, I'm looking here, and I'm saying, well, this is the idea. I mean, the next paragraph here says the plausibility of this objection will vanish the moment we advert to the essential difference between a mere non-compliance and a direct and active resistance. If interposition, if the interposition of the state legislatures be necessary to give effect to the measure of the union, they have only not to act or to act evasively, and the measure is defeated. This neglect of duty may be disguised under the effect, but unsubstantial provisions, so as not to appear, and of course not to excite any alarm in the people for the safety of the Constitution. The state leaders may even make a merit of their surreptitious invasions of it on the ground of some temporary convenience, exemption, or advantage. And how many times have we seen them seize power for temporary, and I put that in quotes, temporary conveniences or exemptions or advantages? COVID is a great example of them seizing the power as far as they could because they said it was going to be a temporary need in order for us to get over this, which would be an advantage.
This is why it's different in different states because, like he says, if there's an out of control federal government, the states can just ignore. There's some states where federal, I don't remember which state, I think it's Missouri. There might be more than just that, but they no longer will assist federal law enforcement in their state. They don't obstruct them, but they just refuse to help them. If they obstructed them, that would be illegal. But of course, you can just not comply, not act. Then this is why some states are so insulated from all the federal nonsense, like Florida, as an example, when it comes to the COVID policy.
And thank goodness, because there are very few bastions of freedom left within this country. And I mean that in a loosest sense. Obviously, we are free, but are we truly? Because of how they continue to encroach upon us. And you spoke earlier that many of these freedoms are very broad, but as far as the narrowed focuses, they have almost completely removed the narrowed freedoms from us in favor of these broad freedoms that if we do not comply to those, then we are just not afforded them.
It's completely gone in some states, of course. Like the Second Amendment doesn't exist in several states, as we know, New York, California.
Even the
Although I'm
First
sure
Amendment,
some parts of California, but some states have just chosen to completely nullify the Bill of Rights, but so has the federal government. So
even the First Amendment, in New York and California, you can be fined upwards of $750,000 for calling an illegal alien an illegal alien.
Yeah, well, personally, I choose not to use the term illegal alien just because I feel like, okay, that's a human being. I'm calling them undocumented. That's just a personal choice. I don't think you should be fined for saying illegal alien. That's ridiculous.
And then for example, they target speech so much that they passed a law in California, not California, New York, to change the title of inmates to incarcerated persons, as if that is
How is that
necessary.
better? Either way, you're freaking in jail or prison. Who cares what they call you?
I mean, as if that is something that people need to worry about. But now, if you call somebody an inmate, you could actually face legal ramifications for calling them an inmate. They could sue you for calling them an inmate if you don't call them incarcerated persons. You're giving more rights to people who forfeited their rights when they got arrested. You're giving more freedoms to all of these misnomers, and you're stripping them away from the regular common day American.
I have a very different feeling about this. I don't think that you should obviously be able to sue somebody for calling you an inmate, but you don't lose all your rights when you go to prison or jail. And that they use that, people believing that, to abuse people in prison, to just do whatever they want. You know how MDOC is run? If you have some sort of infraction, they could just pin anything on you, and you have no, like, you can't defend yourself. This actually happened to me, but I won't go into it in detail here. They just did they flipped our, this is when I was at oh man, what is the name of the freaking CMCF, Rankin County. They flipped our, they searched our, what do they call it, dude? Where they go in, they shoot the gun, everybody has to leave, you get on the ground and all that, and they walk around writing people up while y'all are sitting outside. So they wrote me up for something that I didn't do. And they gave me a hearing, which was a month late. It's supposed to be within 2 weeks, but they waited a whole month. If they take more than 2 weeks, they're supposed to throw it out, but they didn't. And I went out there and I said, hey, I didn't do this. Like, they accused me of having Cash App codes in my stuff, which is completely not true. They just made it up, I guess. And so I told them that, and they're supposed to be recording it during the hearing too. But they just had a recorder sitting there on the table, not even on. They didn't have it on, but it's supposed to be. And they were just like, whatever, they give you a hearing, but it's not fair. So they do use the cover of the penitentiary to just do whatever they want. And one thing that actually does happen within the prison system is if an inmate dies and they don't want anyone to know, like if somebody calls and tries to figure out where they are, they'll just have them on like permanent transport. Every time somebody calls, oh, he's in transport, he's being transported, and they just never, he just is dead, and they just keep telling you he's being transported. So, fun facts.
And so looking at number 17, again, I'm just going to read a couple out of the first paragraph. This is in December 5th of 1787, also by Hamilton. An objection of a nature different from that which has been stated and answered in my last address may perhaps be likewise urged against the people of legislation for the individual citizens of America. It may be said that it would tend to render the government of the Union too powerful and unable to enable too powerful to enable it to absorb those residuary authorities which it might be judged proper to leave with the states for local purposes. Which I think goes on to what we just said about Florida, for example, having its own COVID policy of and not complying with the federal government's policy. Um, I mean, the times that we're in right now are just so tumultuous and very, very shocking, very, very scary that that you never thought that you would be in a point in history in which you can literally see your freedoms being removed from you like fluttering butterflies. And so what say you to that, Rhett?
Say it again.
I was saying that it's a particularly tumultuous time in our history in which we can literally see our freedoms being removed from us as if there were some fluttering butterflies flying to escape. And it's quite shocking, it's quite scary that we can actually see this physically, yet so much inaction is being done.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of action being done that's bad.
I suppose I should rephrase that.
You mean
Then.
inaction from like one side? They're just kind of
I'm
letting it happen.
Yeah, I mean inaction to the salvation of our freedoms.
I don't know. I think there is a group, however small, that actually is trying to stop it. But I don't know. In the long run, obviously, I can't see the future. Things aren't looking good right now, but let's hope it doesn't go as bad as it can. So let's attempt to summarize 16 through 20. I mean, a lot of it's just historical. And
Yes,
we're
18,
not going to go
18
through
just
all
goes
these
over.
different historical accounts here because the point is not the historical examples.
Yeah, 18 through 20 is pretty much just a history lesson. But history
Here,
lessons are
20.
important because, for example, this one is from 19. Towards the end, the impossibility of maintaining order and dispensing justice among these sovereign subjects produced the experiment of dividing the empire into 9 or 10 circles or districts, of giving them an interior organization, and of changing them with the military execution of the laws against delinquent and commoticious members. This experiment has only served to demonstrate more fully the radical vice of the Constitution. Each circle is the miniature picture of the deformities of this political monster. They either fail to execute their commissions or they do it with all the devastation and carnage of civil war. Sometimes whole circles are defaulters, and then they increase the mischief which they were instituted to remedy. And so again, we're talking about civil war. Well, whenever Rhett gets back, he always runs off in the middle of a show. Let's see. What's this? You're always running off in the middle of my points, and then I forget my points when I'm waiting on you to come back. But I think again we're looking at some of these things of what he says here, and again I point out this point where he talks about this is an experiment. And we're talking about the deformities of this political monster, which there are clearly deformities that are within our political monster right now. And it says that they either failed to execute their commissions, or they do it with all the devastation and carnage of civil war. Sometimes those circles are defaulters, and then they increase the mischief which they were instituted to remedy. And I think that is very apparent in times right now where they fail to execute their commissions, which is to protect and preserve this union and to lobby on behalf of the American people. And they are enacting the devastation with all the intentions of civil war based off of what they're doing presently in our government system. And then in even further, when he talks about they increase the mischief which they instituted to remedy, well, you take a look at they are the source of inflation. Then they create this Inflation Reduction Act, which will actually do nothing to reduce inflation. So they're increasing even more the mischief and the chaos with the remedy that they created for the problem that they also created.
Oh God. Um, I don't even think I didn't highlight anything in these last two, but I'll just say I concur. A lot of the problems that are outlined here are kind of what we're seeing, but obviously what they were talking about was the Articles of Confederation and why they had to create the Constitution in the first place, because it just wasn't working.
And I think that's a good case in point to take a look at the Articles of Confederation for just a brief moment here. I mean, obviously, there's going to come a time where we're going to talk about the Articles of Confederation on their own in a different series, perhaps. The Articles of Confederation are not nearly as lengthy as the Federalist Papers, but I think we should, at the very least, acknowledge some of the things within the Articles of Confederation. You have yours, I have mine, so let's take a look here. So I'm going to start up by reading just the first couple of articles. It says this: the style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. Each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence in every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by this confederation expressly delegated to the United States in the Congress assembled. The said states hereby severally enter into a firm league of friendship with each other for their common defense and the security of their liberties and their mutual and general welfare, binding themselves to assist each other against all force offered to or attacks made upon them or any of them on account of religion, sovereignty, trade, or any other pretense whatever. The better to secure and perpetuate mutual friendship and intercourse among the people of the different states of this union, the free inhabitants of each of these states, paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice accepted shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of free citizens in the several states, and the people of each state shall have free ingress and regress to any to and from any other state, and shall enjoy therein all privileges of trade, commerce, subject to the same duties, impositions, and restrictions as the inhabitants thereof respectively, provided that such restrictions shall not extend so far as to prevent the removal of property imported into any state to any other state of which the owner is an inhabitant, provided also that no imposition, duties, or restrictions shall be laid by any state on the property of the United States or either of them. And I can continue reading, but even just reading the first couple of articles, you can see that there's clearly some blemishes within the Articles of Confederation that needed to be ironed out with the Constitution. The idea that property is the determining factor for everything was one to begin with, particularly after the abolition of slavery.
Well, it was more like just an economic union, like the European Union, kind of. Maybe the European Union actually goes further than the articles did, but it was just like a loose friendship. They couldn't even, it actually sounds good
It
in
sounds really
historical
good.
context, but we clearly see that it did not work. And Shays' Rebellion was the first example of why.
It's only when you put it into practice that you actually begin to see where things don't work, where things fall apart because of the lack of centralization. But then where our present system falls apart is because of the excess of centralization of power.
Well, that's the problem with centralization. Once you have it, it tends to act like a black hole, just drawing everything into itself.
An ever expanding
And that's
circle.
just any amount of centralization. And that's why it's always a problem. Because once you centralize, you just centralize more. And I'm sure that we'll see those arguments made in the Anti-Federalist papers, which I ordered a copy of yesterday.
And so, in closing, to 16 through 20, as far as your summation, what would you say is an accurate summation to 16 through 20?
We've got plenty of examples throughout history why confederacies tend to fall apart, one example after another. And of course, those examples are given in order so that we don't make the same mistakes. I have a feeling that these next few are going to probably be very similar.
Yes. So, starting in with number 21, other defects of the present Confederation. This is on December 12th of 1787, also by Alexander Hamilton. To the people of the state of New York, having in the last three numbers taken a summary review of the principal circumstances and events which have depicted the genius and fate of other Confederate governments, I shall now proceed in the enumeration of the most important of those defects which have hitherto disappointed our hopes from the system established among ourselves to form a safe and satisfactory judgment of the proper remedy. It is absolutely necessary that we should be well acquainted with the extent and malignity of the disease. The next most palpable defect of the subsisting confederation is a total want of a sanction to its laws. The United States is now composed, have no powers to exact obedience or punish disobedience to their resolutions, either by pecuniary mocks or by suspension of divestiture privileges or by any constitutional mode. there is no express delegation of authority to them to use force against delinquent members, and if such a right should be ascribed to them, note, to the federal head as resulting from the nature of the social compact between the states, it must be by inference and construction in the face of that part of the second article, by which it is declared that each state shall retain power, jurisdiction, and the right not expressly delegated to the United States and Congress assembled. There is doubtless and striking absurdity in supposing that a right of this kind does not exist, but are reduced to the dilemma either of embracing that supposition, preposterous as it may seem, or having contriving or contriving or explaining away a provision which has been of late a repeated theme of the eulogies of those who oppose the new Constitution and the want of which in that plan has been subject to of much plausible and animadversion and severe criticism. If we are unwilling to impair the force of this applauded provision, we shall be obliged to conclude that the United States afford the extraordinary spectacle of a government destitute even of the shadow of constitutional power to enforce the execution of its own laws. It will appear from the specimens which have been cited that the American Confederacy in this particular stands discriminated from every other institution of a similar kind and exhibits a new and unexampled phenomenon in the political world. And that's just reading an opening here that, as he outlines, one of the chief issues with the Articles of Confederation is that while we are a government, the United States, we are just a government in name, because as the government had no power on its own to enforce any of its own laws, because there were no powers delegated to the Congress of the United States.
So Shays' Rebellion, really the trigger for all this. A farmer, I think his name was Daniel Shays, he was required to pay back some sort of debt for the war. And him and his, militia, local militia, nearly overthrew the state government of Massachusetts. This was the first warning sign that some sort of revision had to be undergone. Because if a local militia can just easily overthrow the state government and the national government can't do anything about it, that's a problem. And the other colonies aren't obligated to help.
Exactly. And it's sort of it also makes sort of a dilemma for the other colonies to help, because the way the Articles of Confederation are written are that we're supposed to have the rights to do such things as free people who exercise the free immunities of citizens within the sister states. And so for them to get involved would be not too dissimilar from creating civil war in of itself.
I feel like there's only so much you can say about the Articles of Confederation. The basic idea here is that they just couldn't do anything. It was just a Continental Congress. They couldn't put down a rebellion in a state, and no other state had to help. So, you can't have a state government just being overthrown like nonchalantly like that. And it's understandable how that was the trigger that led to the Constitutional Convention.
Yes, yes, indeed. And so let's just quickly list off many of the objections that he has made to to the Confederacy. And I can go through here. And one of them, if you look in number 22, is that there's another defect to the Constitution, to the present Confederation. And it goes on and talks about how the several states, and this I think this is actually given an example of Shays' Rebellion. The powers of raising armies by the most obvious constructions of the Articles of Confederation is merely a power of making requisitions upon the states for quotas of men. This practice in the course of the late war was found replete with the obstructions to a vigorous and to an economic system of defense. It gave birth to a competition between the states, which created a kind of auction for men. And it goes on, talks about some of those problems that they have there. And then you see more issues outlined here, but now another one is the necessity of government as an energetic as opposed to the preservation of the Union. And that one where you see the necessity of the Constitution at least equally energetic with the one proposed to the preservation of the Union is at the point the point at the examination of which we are arrived now. And it just goes on to talk more and more about how there really is nothing more binding them together than their word, so to speak. Nothing really holds them together.
And
Oh,
of
the
course,
Articles
you
of
just can't,
Confederation.
you can't, you can never trust human beings at large to keep their word. That's why we have to have systems in place. You can trust people individually if you know them well enough, but you cannot trust humanity as such with without laws, without some sort of system to keep people well behaved.
Yes, and I think that's well said by Hamilton as well. Here in the 16th paper, number, where he says, this strong propensity of the human heart would find powerful auxiliaries in the objects of state regulation. Which in my view just goes on to say what you've just said is humans are pre-wired to follow regulation, to follow some sort of structure. When we don't have that type of structure, we fall into absolute anarchy and chaos. And there's the reason why you cannot just trust human beings to follow things without there being some consequence for it. Because if there's no consequence, why should I follow it to begin with?
The number of people who do good, even when no one's watching, is very, very small compared to the average person who, if there's nobody watching, if there's no rules, then the worst and most base desires are what is sought after. And the founders are obviously very different from the intellectuals of our day because they actually had this tragic view of humanity. They understood that you can't trust people to do the right thing. Some people maybe, but you can't trust, like I said, the public at large to do the right thing. But we still want people to have freedom, though.
Yeah, so the way that they got around it was they compelled people to do the right things by offering them good and bad consequences for the actions that they made. With a capitalist system, obviously that created competition and trade, but it also gave an incentive for you to do right by your fellow man because you would be able to get something of equal or greater value in return to what you were going to give. And inversely, the penal system, which was created, which was designed to show that there was also bad consequences for crimes that you would make against your fellow man if you would try to obstruct your fellow man's freedoms, you would have to have your freedom obstructed from you through our penal system. So they were compelled to do good. They were compelled to do the right thing by simple implementations of economic policy and penal systems. My co-host is
this reason
just
here is
dying
just,
right here.
I'm so congested, just like chronic congestion from this vaping. As you can see, I haven't.
Remember kids, don't vape or you will cough like a hag and die miserably on stream.
Dude, some people might be able to tolerate it just fine, but I've been vaping the highest nicotine content juice, and I also grew up with asthma. So, you know, it's
And
probably
it also didn't help
quitting
that
is
you were
probably
slightly overweight when you
a
started
good
smoking
idea.
too.
Well, no, I didn't smoke consistently.
As I said, when
Just
you
smoked off
started,
and on.
that's what I
When
said
I
when you
started,
started,
I wasn't that over. I mean, I might have been
slightly,
overweight technically, but
slightly overweight.
so this is one reason why I am not an anarchist anymore. Well, I don't think I ever really truly was fully bought into the philosophy. I mean, I know it pretty well, but the problem is that's just theory and philosophy. It's very idealistic. When you try to put that into practice, what happens? It's not this utopian. It seems like a utopian dream to me, having no government at all. But of course, having a government is just as bad in many ways. So it's really just a trade-off. It's a compromise.
Yeah, another great words from Dr. Thomas Sowell is that in life there are no perfect systems. They're just trade-offs.
I think that having the smallest possible, I guess you could call me a minarchist. I want the smallest possible government that you can possibly imagine. It only has like 2 or 3 responsibilities, like the original American government. I think would, if we could keep it like that forever, that's the ideal government.
Absolutely perfect. However, as you pointed out earlier, government systems, once they become centralized, as I say, are an ever expanding circle. They start from a centralized point and they expand outwards until they have encircled the entire country. And in this case, they are trying to encircle the entire world.
Well, maybe it's just the thing. All governments have expiration dates. It doesn't matter how good you set it up. There's always the possibility and a high probability that it's not going to exist in that form forever. It's a limited time deal.
That also has to speak to the genius of the founders to have written in there the Convention of States and the way that the union can be dissolved and still come back to itself. It is the caveat to what you're talking about, the expiration. This is I had the word on the tip of my tongue and I was speaking and it just vanished. This is sort of uh I had the word on the tip of my tongue. It was right there in the front of my brain, and now it's gone, and I can't think of it. What was I about to say?
I have no way of knowing.
Oh,
I don't
oh
have
yes,
access to your mind.
here it is. It came back to me. The founders wrote into the Constitution a fail-safe to the expansion of power, which was the Convention of States.
Yeah. At the Constitutional Convention, of course, they debated over every single sentence, every word in the Constitution vigorously. And there was no agreement really when it came to specific articles, except on Article 5, which was the last one that was introduced, of course, the last one because it's at the end of the Constitutional Convention, somebody, I don't remember who, it might have been Samuel Adams, but somebody stood up and said, hey, how about this? We worked so hard on all this, but we haven't added a fail-safe. And so that, of course, he proposed the Convention of States possibility. It was a unanimous, no debate. Everybody
Yeah.
agreed immediately, which is
Yes.
hard because these people were not as monolithic as people who don't know history might think, because they were just as divided in many ways as we are today. They were just
and
still
their
civil though.
and their division was better than our division because they caned people in the halls of Congress.
They were, well, yeah, but that's back when you could still do duels legally.
Yes.
We think of some of the stuff that they said about each other and published in the press is like terrible, dude. And Aaron Burr literally shot Alexander Hamilton and killed him because he was pissed off that he supported Jefferson and ruined his political career. He was that mad. He killed him. And
Could you imagine in this day and age, rather than us having to sit there and filibuster, that Mitch McConnell, turtleneck Mitch, just walked over and and caned Chuck Schumer on the side of the head. Just can't.
oh man,
Turtleneck Mitch just walks over like this. just starts caning Chuck Schumer right inside of the head. How much better our government system would be.
I don't know. Well, I mean, it'd probably be a whole lot worse. We'd probably have a civil war immediately. Oh, look, we're already having one of those.
AOC would never be able to speak because every time she opened her mouth, somebody would cane her.
Dude, I've got to interrupt this message. I've got to interrupt this program to deliver this message because I have just seen something in the news.
What I wish I had. I wish
this is completely unrelated to politics.
Where I could blow up the thing and just go boom. My breaking news thing that I did in the last thing.
Capitol Records signs first AI virtual rapper.
AI virtual rapper.
A freaking metaverse rapper that doesn't even exist got signed by Capitol Records. This is the end of creativity as we know it.
So a robot is taking money away from a actual artist.
Well, I don't know if he's necessarily taking any money away from him, but wait, he's not even a human. He doesn't need money. What are they going to do with it?
My point exactly. A robot is taking away a record deal that a human being could get.
Well, I mean, record deals aren't really that big of a deal anymore. But I mean, they're still a big deal, but not like they used to be. A robot rapper with over 10 million TikTok followers signed a deal with Capitol. They say he signed a deal, like he signed it. Nobody signed it for him. He did it.
Oh God!
I had to go see FN Mecca. He has over 1 billion views on TikTok as the platform's top virtual being.
I don't watch TikTok. I don't have TikTok, so I wouldn't know.
No, you can probably find it on YouTube. And I'm probably going to forget about it, but I just had to say that because it was so preposterous.
So absurd. Speaking of absurdities, let's continue with some more absurdities. So we do know that we're about to be given the affidavit this week. I don't know what day. I think they said it might be on Tuesday or Thursday. But we're about to be given key portions of the affidavit, which I think, again, is government trying. As I sat back, I was listening to your voice in my head speak to me. Yeah, don't give me that look. It's not that type of speaking, but you were speaking to me. What you had said, which was that they didn't raid Donald Trump's home for evidence on him. They raided Donald Trump's home evidence on them because he declassified Crossfire Hurricane. He declassified the spies of Wiregate. He declassified Russiagate information, the Russia collusion hoax, and he had all this stuff declassified, which incriminated the deep state and the FBI. And so when we get ready to see this affidavit, and this is also not related to the Confederates, to the Federalist Papers. When we get ready to see this affidavit, it's only going to be key portions of it. Much of it's going to be redacted, and much of it is not even going to be included at all. So, how trusting can we be that the affidavit will actually present any information that we'll be able to use and scrutinize as a country?
I've always felt like if you're going to redact it, just don't even freaking release it. Like, what's the point? If you're just going to take out all the information besides like the, this, that, there, we, them, her, she, if you're going to, well, sometimes they even take out she and her, and sometimes they take out they, them. But if you're going to redact everything, then you might as well just release a piece of notebook paper. I mean, what are you doing? Yes, it'll probably be so heavily redacted that it'll be pointless to even read it.
Which I would say, not tying into the Federalist Papers, is a clear defect with our present system.
Yeah.
And
well, they need to get rid of Trump needs to get rid of the FBI.
He needs to get rid of the FBI, the CIA. He needs to get rid of
he needs to get rid of like 80% of the federal government.
Yes.
80% of it, maybe 90%.
100%. Get rid of all of it.
I mean, if he got rid of 100%, he'd have to like leave office. Like he'd have to resign.
Well,
he'd have to fire himself. And
how about this? Get rid of 97% of the government.
Well,
and
the executive, I should be saying the executive branch, because that's all it really is.
Just leave the Supreme Court, Congress, and the executive branch left. Fire everybody else.
You know what would actually happen? Like if a singular president, if he was able to get the military on his side, he could just totally take over, become a dictator, and get rid of the whole government, and we have a military dictatorship. All he'd have to do is convince the top generals and most of the military, and then bam, everything's over with.
Yeah, and it's very scary how close we actually are to that of Joe Biden in office, because he's not the president.
Have a military coup.
Man. Somebody else is running things, and I would happen to believe that it would be those 4-star and 5-star generals, and maybe somebody else.
I think it's Joe Biden's chief of staff. What's his name?
I can't remember that guy's name.
I don't know, but he's definitely running everything at the White House, because Joe Biden is like sleeping.
Oh, did you see the latest one? The latest thing when he came back from his vacation to sign the Inflation Reduction Act, and he's sitting there trying to give people the pencil, and he looks like a grandpa at a nursing home that's kind of out of it. He's all.
No, I haven't seen that. So I see here that 23 through 29 is actually a separate section.
Is it?
Yeah.
So I suppose
it's just common defense.
Well, I mean, it's pretty much going on to the same type of thing. It's about defects. Let me take a look here, because I got 23 on the necessity.
No, this is about the Constitution.
Okay. So basically we stop at 22.
Yeah, I suppose we'll do 23 through 29, because that's a whole section.
Yeah, because I'd say 22 is the last one talking about the defects. And so I'll just read the first 2 paragraphs of 22. It says, in addition to the defects already enumerated in the existing federal system, there are others of not less importance which concur, rendering it altogether unfit for the administration of the affairs of the Union. The want of a power to regulate commerce is by all parties allowed to be of the number. The utility of such power has been anticipated,
sir.
It has an antiquated. It's not even a Q in this. Has been anticipated under the first head of our inquiries, and for this reason, as well as from the universal conviction entertained upon the subject, little need be added in this place. It is indeed evident on the most superficial view that there is no object either as it respects the interests of trade or finance that more strongly demands a federal superintendence. The want of it is already operated as a bar to the formation of beneficial treaties with foreign powers and has given occasions of dissatisfaction between the states. No nation acquainted with with the nature of our political association would be unwise enough to enter into stipulations with the United States by which they conceded privileges of any importance to them, while they were apprised that the engagements on the part of the Union might at any moment be violated by its members, and while they found from experience that they might enjoy every advantage they desired in our markets without granting us any return by such as their momentary convenience might suggest. It is not therefore to be wondered that that Mr. Jenkinson, in ushering into the House of Com the House of Commons a bill for regulating the temporary intercourse between the two countries, should preface its introduction by a declaration that similar provisions in former bills had been found to answer every purpose to the commerce of Great Britain, and that it would be prudent to persist in the plan until it should appear whether the American government was likely or not to acquire greater consistency. And I think consistency was the test of the experimentation. We have proven to be consistent for the most part, consistently corrupt in modern day, but we've proven to be consistent for the most part, I would say. But I also have to say this. I admire that Hamilton is able to create such a long sentence without it being a run-on.
Yeah, he was really talented. That did you see? I posted on Facebook the letter that he wrote to that pastor who visited. What was it?
Mr. Jenkinson.
No, not Mr. Jenkinson. I don't remember his name. He was a pastor who visited. Dude, what is it? Let me go look up the article that I posted. It wasn't that long ago, but he wrote a letter to this guy describing the devastation that occurred after the hurricane hit. That this letter is what triggered the businessmen of St. Croix to take up a collection to send him to New York. And that's how he got to the United States. He was actually born on St. Kitts and Nevis, but he lived on St. Croix at the time that the hurricane hit. And if you read this, he was like 17 when he wrote this. He was already like extremely talented, gifted as a writer, and he wasn't educated. It's just natural. So he was self-taught. I'll send you the link so you can read that letter.
Because I look at Hamilton's writings a lot and I'm like, my gosh, this sentence never ends.
Yeah, and it makes sense most of the time to us. Although they did speak differently back then. So
but
sometimes you have to read it twice to understand what he's saying.
It's not only that, it's the excellent usage of punctuation. If we were to try to write a sentence of equal length, we'd have to go back and revise it multiple times in order to put the proper punctuation, whether it be semicolon, colons, or commas in place in order to make it not be a run.
I would say, actually, I think I'm pretty good at writing and not forgetting the punctuation in the proper place, although I'm probably not at the, I don't write sentences that long usually. So
I mean, I write pretty long sentences, but not not to the length of Hamilton's.
actually, I do write long sentences sometimes. It just depends on what I'm writing about. I have to go back and read some of the like scientific philosophical papers that I write.
I mean,
Sometimes I have a sentence that's as long as a paragraph.
some of Hamilton's sentences are entire paragraphs in the in of themselves.
Yeah, they're
And
still
can
probably not.
can you imagine that being up in school where you have to have three sentences to in a paragraph before you can move, or is it 3 to 5 sentences in a
3 to
paragraph before you
5,
can
yeah.
move? And Hamilton's entire sentence is about the length of a paragraph.
Yeah, that's why it's a stupid rule. Like, sentences can be really long, 3 to 5. I understand why they gave us that stipulation, but it's so stupid. Sometimes I'd write a sentence or two and I'm just like, dude, I can move on now. I don't need to write two more.
Yes.
You know, uh being being able to spontaneously write was not helpful for me in school because I would literally just put bullshit on a page that sounded really good for a research paper in like 30 minutes and I never even read the book. And it was school. School sucks. I hate school. I'd
You know,
rather just learn on my own.
I loved school, just not school that required me to do work.
I hate I've only enjoyed certain classes, but school as a whole, I hate it.
I've always enjoyed school. I've hated the fact that school felt like a chore. That everything felt so mundane and time consuming, and I hated it.
It
So
was so boring to me.
yeah, it was. And so I always wind up like instead of doing my work, I wrote books. I wrote entire chapters and drew entire, notebooks full of stuff during class, instead of actually paying attention. But when I got to college and I didn't have to do work, I actually did all of the work because it was my choice. It didn't feel like it was a chore. I actually I enjoy learning. I just hate when people force me to do work.
Yeah. I would say in college it was less boring. I pretty much did all the work too, but like in English composition, I think it was the first English composition class. It was
English
a
composition
hybrid.
class one was my favorite English course I've ever taken because it was my teacher, Miss Payton. It was only writing research papers. That's all we ever got graded on. And it was not just research papers, but narratives about yourself. So you really couldn't fail if you could write properly.
So when I took it, this was I didn't take it at UNH. I took it at JD. So it was a hybrid course, half online, half in class, but we were still supposed to show up to class. I think I told you this story before. And after like the first 2 or 3 classes, I just quit going, but I still did all my assignments online. And the teacher just didn't care. I thought he was going to fail me, but I still got like a 98 or 99. And my research paper at the end was about globalism. And I did zero research. And I wrote it while I was drunk. And I think I made 100 on it.
Well, it just goes to show that you don't really need to do much research to
I
talk about
already knew
globalism.
enough to write a whole paper on it, drunk.
But also, the thing I loved about college was the freedom that the teachers allowed you to do to express yourselves in your work. I didn't care about expressing myself on campus. I cared about expressing myself in the work that I was able to do, my public speaking speeches, my writings. Um, I remember I had a course with world history and world civilizations 1 and 2. I had Dr. Shells for that and Perk. And I made a 100 on every single test that he gave. And I didn't want to do the research paper. I had to learn a completely different format, which was Chicago format that I had never used before. Because we were forced to learn how to do MLA format that nobody uses in college. And so, I'm sitting there to use the Chicago format. I'm like, so I did mine on Viking civilization. And I wrote like half of the paper. And I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I already know about Viking civilization, but I don't feel like reading and researching because you had to get so many bibliographies and whatnot. And so I was like, and I don't feel like having to do all of that. So I I did the presentation to get the 20 bonus points. Well, you do a PowerPoint presentation and you give a 10-minute speech about it, and then you're supposed to turn in your paper. Well, I did the PowerPoint, and then I told Dr. Scholes, well, the paper, I had a power outage and it deleted it. All I have is half of the paper. And it's like, well, you'll get a D if you don't turn it in. I'm like, well, he said, well, since you made a 100 on every single test that I gave you, I don't just like don't even worry about turning it in. I'm not even going to bother grading it. You're still going to pass with a B average.
Yeah, I remember public speaking. I think we had to do like 3 or 4 different. I only remember 2 of them. One of them was on third parties, and I think my first one was about DMT and psychedelics, and it was fine. I could just talk about whatever I wanted. It was about the book DMT, the spirit molecule, but that was at UNH in New Haven, Connecticut. So I kind of had an old hippie as a teacher in that class. So
The
I could
teacher
talk about
really makes
whatever.
all the teacher really makes all the difference too. My math teacher in college, Dr. Ross, um, he preached math. Like you went to his classroom, you had a sermon about math, about trigonometry and calculus and statistics, and he made it so entertaining that I was able to pass his course with a 97 grade point average almost every single time I took his course, no matter which math course it was. But when I went and took a different course for calculus 2, I failed it horribly because I
I
wasn't
hated.
I, I wasn't interested. Mr. Ross made it so interesting for me to actually enjoy it.
I never had a teacher that made math fun or interesting. I always hated it. I still made good grades, but I hated doing it. Anyway,
We're getting sidetracked, sidebarred. But I think we've pretty much talked about most of the defects that have to deal with the Constitution, with the Articles of Confederation.
endlessly because we've talked about them in other episodes too. But hopefully next week we'll be able to get on to like the actual pros of the Constitution instead of the cons of the articles.
But the history lesson that we get talking about the cons sets up the pros, and it's important. In order to know where we need to go, people need to know where we came from. As we always say, if you want to know where I'm going, you need to know where I've been. And so the history lesson is important because it sets up where we are in our situation right now, not just setting up the birth of the Constitution, which obviously this does, but this also sets up the breaking point and where we are right now as a nation, as a people in general, because people have spent a significant amount of time trying to rewrite or erase history. And whenever that happens and people forget what actually happened, what is true history allows itself to repeat and repeats worse than it did before.
Oh yeah, you know what that reminds me of? Whenever I think this might have been it's in Matthew. I don't remember if it's in the Sermon on the Mount or not, but whenever he says, um, uh, I need to find the verse because I'm going to
Oh,
misquote
that
it.
that reminds me what I was doing something earlier. I was looking here on my Bible on my phone to get that Leviticus scripture from you for you, and I forgot.
Okay, here it is. Hmm. Oh man, that's a terrible article. Matthew 12. Why is it only giving me the first verse?
And
Okay.
there it was. It was the scripture from earlier was Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10. And it said, "And ye shall hallow the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possession, and you shall return every man unto his family."
So this goes to show just an example, biblically speaking, of why the second time around is much worse. When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest and finds none. And then he says, I will return to my home from which I came. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. So shall it be with this wicked generation. That's why, somebody who gets clean from drugs and then goes back usually ends up dying, or if not dying, in a much worse situation than they were the first time. I know plenty of people this has happened to. It's happened to me. I ended up going to prison. There were several times when I stopped and got clean. And every time I came back, it was a worse situation. So the same can be said for the nation as a whole, because systems and people as a whole tend to resemble, or should I say individual lives resemble, the group at large, because individuals are a microcosm of the universe. So there's no reason to assume that a second go around with a civil war won't end much, much worse than the first one did.
I would agree with that, because what this would be, relatively speaking, the third dissolution of our union to some degree. And it will be probably the worst of all of them. People say, well, you have to compare that to the Civil War. Why, yes, I do compare it to the Civil War, and I do think that the time that we're in right now is substantially worse than the Civil War. If we do come to dissolution, it will be, without doubt, substantially worse.
Well, I think we're already more divided than we were then.
Yes.
Because honestly, I can't see a way back at this point. I'm not saying there's not one, but I don't personally see one at this time.
The only way that I see one at this time is a resurgence of religion in the United States, particularly Judeo-Christian religion in the United States. That's the only thing that I see that will be able to bring us back around, because that is the very core of our country, is that belief. And
I do see that happening to some degree, but I don't know if it's going to be enough.
It has strayed so far. I mean, when you can have drag shows in churches, you can have kids being forced to be engaged with transsexual drag queens in their schools, and it be filmed for a commercial on television. When you can have a thing like Postmates talk about a bottom friendly menu and advertise that towards children throughout Gay Pride Month, as if this is stuff that is supposed to be uh, of the moral fiber of our country. We've strayed very, very far, and I don't mean to constantly harp about religion, but I'm a religious person. I'm a very spiritual person, but there are very clear indications of spiritual anomalies within the United States right now, and particularly spiritual emptiness within the United States. And other spirits or machinations of other entities, if you will, whether you believe in those or not, have come to fill the gaping void that has been left by by us abandoning the God in which we founded this country on. And so these
It's
other
exactly what was predicted
entities,
by Nietzsche.
yeah, these other entities have come in and they are seeking to fill the gaping void that was left by our abandonment of God.
I don't think that there's a positive note we can end on at this point.
Well, I can think of one. And the positive note is that I am seeing a resurgence of that type of faith.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think so too. But I don't know if it's, I think it does have the possibility to be strong enough to save the country.
And
But
I will say this to everybody who is as dreary as we have been. Be reminded and be encouraged that it takes only faith the size of a mustard seed in order for God to show up and grow. And though the resurgence which we have seen is small in number, it is great for the bounty that it will reward us with. All it takes is a few seeds planted here and there, and the shade from the trees that it will grow will cover us all. So be encouraged. And that's the best thing that we can do right now, is be encouraged that we are getting back on the right road. And with that, I think we're done here. So if you like this episode, please like and share and comment and all of that stuff. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, on Truth Social, follow us on YouTube, all the other places. Follow us on, listen to us, download and share on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker Audio, Radio Public, the Pony Expression, Sisters Ass, everywhere that you can find us. We are there. Destroy of America of Payson Williams, Destroy of America PW. And I'm your host, DeAndre Bass, my co-host, Rhett Williams, and we will see you all next time. Awesome show. So we're still going to do our news thing on Wednesday because I am going to be off on Wednesday, at least according to my schedule so far, unless they decide to change it spontaneously in the middle of the week. But we'll still be on our show for Sunday, for Wednesday. However, the meeting again will be removed to. Well, we might. You want to do the meeting Wednesday, or do you want to do the meeting Saturday?
Saturday.
Okay, so we'll do a meeting Saturday, and that way we'll have time to brainstorm some ideas and things like that we'll be able to do to really push this stuff to the next level. Because I think we have done all we could right now as far as producing content. Now we have to shift gears and push the content. However way we can do it. Because I am satisfied with the degree of content in which we're pushing out.
Some podcasts only do once a week. So.
We practically do 5 episodes a week. And then with all the guest appearances that I make, on other people's shows, we're pretty much never stop working. Some some YouTube channels have followings of 300,000, 600,000 people, and they only produce 2 episodes a month. So we have to figure out what the solution is and then implement it. So that's going to take us some time doing some research. So I guess this is actually a godsend from God, that my schedule has changed, because during the daytime that will allow me time to investigate more into everything, because at nighttime I'm working on other people's shows, and I'm working on our show. So during the day, if I have nothing to do, that'll give me some time to go research solutions that we can come up with and stuff like that. So maybe this is a godsend opportunity that we can for us to shift, for us to be able to shift focus and get some things. And also one of the next best things, we need to pursue a better sponsor. Now, right now we've been sponsored by Anchor, but the way to get sponsors is to go out and ask companies to sponsor us.
Nobody's going to sponsor us if our following is not big enough,
That's
because then
true.
their product won't be in front of that many people.
That's true. However, there are some places that don't care. And those are the ones that we need to try to get in front of, that are already making so much money that they don't really mind having a small audience, just so long as they can get a small audience. So we need to start doing that, because if we can get more sponsors, that allows us to have more money to put into the software that we need in order to produce higher quality content, because the type of content that we're producing isn't going to change, but the quality of our recording equipment is going to change. The quality of where we do our recordings eventually is going to change, as we get vehicles and stuff, and as we begin to make more money, obviously that opens us up to getting a studio or something of that nature. That's further down the line, but and you see where I'm going here, big picture, long term. Obviously, we're trying to get to that point where we're able to produce consistent, high quality content. And if that requires us, because we've talked about this before, if that requires us reducing the amount of time that we spend on an episode, then maybe, but we've already cut back significantly on time. But maybe if that requires us, producing less content, maybe 2 episodes in a week instead of the 4 or 5 that we do, in order to produce higher quality content, if we want to continue with the same length of time and stuff like that. So, there's a lot of different avenues and stuff that we can research and juggle and see what would be the best things to do. So, I'm getting with Jay, I'm getting with other friends that do podcasts, and trying to figure out some solutions and answers in order that we can come to an understanding of what we can do to really explode this the way that it should be. Because I do believe that we're doing the work of God. I do believe that we're doing the right thing, and I do believe that the information that we are providing is accurate and is needed. So if we are doing what God has for us to do, all we have to do now is pursue the method that he wants us to take to explode this. And I think it will come to us if we research it. But we'll talk more about it during the meeting. So, you have anything before we go? I forgot to turn off the stream, but they get to have the bonus content anyway.